They spent months setting it up, the perfect trap, designed specifically for you. Every word calculated, every smile rehearsed, every piece positioned like chess on a board you weren't supposed to see. But here's what shook them to their core. Chosen one. You didn't just avoid the trap, you saw through it before they even finished building it. And that recognition, that clarity you possessed when everyone else was blind, that's what's eating them alive right now. Because the trap wasn't just meant to catch you, it was meant to destroy your credibility, isolate you completely, and make you question your own sanity. But you walked right past it, unbothered, untouched, and that failure is the one thing they can't recover from. Let me tell you something that's going to land hard. The people who set this trap weren't strangers. They weren't random enemies lurking in shadows. These were the ones closest to you, the ones who knew your patterns, your vulnerabilities, your triggers. They studied you like scientists study specimens, taking notes on when you'd be most emotionally exposed, when you'd be most likely to trust, when your guard would naturally drop. They weaponized your kindness, turned your openness into ammunition, and crafted a scenario so believable that anyone else would have walked straight into the fire. But you didn't. And now they're not just disappointed, they're terrified. Because if you could see through their masterpiece, what else have you been seeing that you haven't said out loud yet? Psychology shows us that manipulation only works when the target is unaware of the game being played. Studies on social engineering reveal that the most successful deceptions rely on exploiting trust and creating urgency that bypasses logical thinking. But your intuition operated faster than their strategy. While they were busy perfecting their performance, you were reading the energy behind their words. You noticed the micro-expressions they couldn't control, the inconsistencies in their stories, the way their energy shifted when they thought you weren't paying attention. That's not paranoia, chosen one. That's heightened perception. That's the result of surviving enough betrayals that your spirit developed an early warning system they never accounted for. And now they're furious, because the one thing they invested the most effort into became the clearest proof of your power. Before we go deeper into this, I need you to do something. If you're watching this and you felt that eerie sensation of seeing through someone's facade while everyone else is completely fooled, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel, because this message isn't reaching you by accident. You're here because you're part of a frequency that most people will never access. And drop a comment with the number 777 if you know in your soul that you've walked past traps that were specifically designed to take you down. This isn't just a video. This is confirmation that your discernment is not only real, it's your greatest weapon. Now, let's break down exactly why their perfect trap failed, and why that failure has them spiraling in ways they can't hide anymore. Number 1. You recognized the pattern before they finished the setup. Nothing terrifies a manipulator more than realizing their target has already seen this movie. That's exactly where you stood when they started laying their trap. While they thought they were being clever, original, tactical, you were connecting dots they didn't even know were visible. You'd seen this pattern before, maybe in a different relationship, maybe in a past situation, but the energy signature was identical. The over-the-top friendliness that came out of nowhere, the sudden interest in your life after months of distance, the convenient timing of their kindness right when you were going through something difficult. These weren't coincidences, they were ingredients. And you recognized the recipe before they could serve you the poison. Think about this for a moment. Patterns don't just repeat in behavior, they repeat in energy. There's a frequency to deception that remains consistent regardless of who's delivering it. The trap they set for you had all the hallmarks of traps you'd escaped before. The false urgency pushing you to make quick decisions. The isolation tactics designed to cut you off from people who might warn you. The love-bombing phase meant to lower your defenses and make you feel special. But here's what they miscalculated. Your past pain wasn't your weakness. It became your teacher. Every betrayal you survived installed new software in your awareness. Every lesson carved deeper discernment into your spirit. So, when they approached with their perfectly crafted scenario, you didn't see opportunity. You saw a rerun, and you changed the channel before the trap could even snap shut. The fury they're experiencing now comes from a brutal realization. They can't outsmart someone who's already graduated from the school they're still attending. You've been through the curriculum. You've taken the tests. You know exactly what manipulation looks like when it's dressed up as care, what control looks like when it's packaged as concern, what betrayal sounds like when it's whispered through compliments. They thought they were dealing with the old version of you, the one who gave too many chances, the one who wanted to believe the best in people. But you're not that person anymore. You evolved, and their trap was built for someone who no longer exists. That's why it failed. That's why they're furious. Because the trap didn't just fail to catch you. It exposed them. And now they have to live with the knowledge that you saw them clearly while they were busy congratulating themselves on their cleverness. Number 2, your silence made them think you were clueless, but you were collecting evidence. They mistook your quietness for naivety. That was their fatal error. While they were performing their elaborate scheme, smiling in your face while plotting behind your back, you weren't oblivious. You were observing. You were documenting. You were watching how the pieces moved, who was communicating with whom, which stories were changing, which timelines weren't adding up. Your silence wasn't ignorance, it was strategy. You knew that speaking too soon would only give them time to adjust their approach, to cover their tracks, to spin new narratives. So you stayed quiet and let them believe they were winning. And in that space of assumed victory, they got sloppy, they got confident, they stopped being as careful. And that's when you saw everything. Chosen one, there's a weapon that most people never learn to use. Strategic silence, the ability to see clearly while appearing unaware. The capacity to let people reveal themselves fully before you make your move. You mastered this not through manipulation, but through survival. You learned that premature confrontation often just gives manipulators ammunition to gaslight you, to make you look unstable, to paint you as the problem. So, instead of reacting immediately to what you sensed, you waited. You watched their patterns solidify. You noticed who was suddenly unavailable when you needed support. You saw who was asking strange questions about your plans, your movements, your state of mind. You paid attention to who was creating distance while pretending everything was normal. All of this information stacked up like evidence in a case you were building, without them knowing you were the detective. Now here's where their fury intensifies. They're realizing that every conversation they thought was casual, every encounter they believed was controlled, every moment they assumed you were in the dark, you were actually gathering data. You weren't just protecting yourself, you were learning their entire playbook. You know their tactics now. You understand how they coordinate. You've seen behind the curtain of their performance, and that knowledge is permanent. They can't undo what you've already observed. They can't erase the moments where they slipped up and revealed their true intentions. Your silence gave them the rope, and they tied it around their own credibility. And now that the trap has failed, they're scrambling to figure out how much you actually know. The paranoia they're experiencing is the consequence of underestimating someone who was awake the entire time they thought you were sleeping. That's the power of strategic observation, chosen one. You didn't need to announce what you saw. Time is doing that for you. Number 3. The trap required. Your emotional reaction, but you stayed calm. Manipulation feeds on emotion. That's the fuel that makes every trap effective. They needed you angry, defensive, desperate, reactive. They needed you to lash out so they could play victim. They needed you confused so they could offer their twisted version of clarity. They needed you isolated so you'd come running back to them for validation. But you gave them nothing. You stayed eerily calm. And that composure wasn't fake. It wasn't performance. It came from a place deeper than their schemes could reach. You'd already done the internal work they were hoping you'd avoided. You'd already healed the wounds they were planning to rip open. You'd already built a foundation of self-awareness that their manipulation couldn't shake. So when they pulled the trigger on their trap, expecting an explosion of emotion they could exploit, they got silence. They got stillness. They got a version of you they had no script for. Think about what that does to a manipulator's confidence. Their entire strategy depends on predictable reactions. They need you to behave according to the profile they've built of you. But when you don't respond the way they calculated, when you remain centered in the middle of chaos they created specifically to destabilize you, it breaks their system. Suddenly, they're the ones feeling off balance. They're the ones scrambling to adjust. They start overplaying their hand, pushing harder, adding more pressure, because the initial trap didn't work, and every escalation they attempt only makes their intentions more obvious to everyone watching. Your emotional regulation became the mirror that reflected their desperation. Your calm became the evidence of their chaos. And now they're dealing with the consequences of trying to manipulate someone who's already mastered their own emotional landscape. Here's the brutal truth they're choking on right now. They spent all that time studying your weaknesses, but they never considered that you'd spent even more time transforming those weaknesses into strengths. The triggers they were planning to exploit no longer exist in the same form. The insecurities they wanted to weaponize have been healed. The emotional buttons they tried to push have been rewired. You're not the same person they mapped out in their strategy sessions. You've evolved past their understanding of you. And that evolution is what made their perfect trap absolutely worthless. They built a cage for someone who'd already learned to fly. They dug a pit for someone who'd already learned to see in the dark. And now, chosen one, they're the ones trapped in the consequences of their own malicious intent while you walk free, unbothered, and more powerful than ever, because you proved to yourself that no scheme designed against you can succeed when you're rooted in awareness and inner peace. Number 4. They needed you isolated, but your real circle never wavered. One of the most critical components of their trap was separation. They needed to cut you off from the people who actually see you clearly, the ones who would have immediately warned you about what was happening. So they started spreading subtle poison, little comments designed to make you doubt your closest connections, manufactured situations meant to create distance between you and the people who genuinely support you. They played both sides. telling you one thing while telling your real friends something completely different, hoping the confusion would create fractures they could exploit. But here's what broke their scheme apart. Your real circle never budged. The people who truly know you, who've walked with you through actual storms, who understand your character beyond surface interactions, they didn't believe the lies. They didn't participate in the setup. And their loyalty became the foundation that made the trap collapse before it could fully form. Chosen one, there's something powerful about authentic relationships that manipulation can never penetrate. Real connection isn't built on convenience or performance. It's forged through consistent truth, through showing up in hard moments, through seeing someone's full humanity and choosing to stay. The people in your corner have witnessed your growth. They've seen how you handle adversity. They know the difference between your actual character and the false narrative being spread about you. So when the manipulators tried to turn your circle against you, it didn't work. Your people asked questions. They checked in directly with you instead of believing gossip. They gave you the benefit of the doubt because you'd already built a foundation of trust that gossip couldn't erode. And that solidarity, that refusal to participate in your destruction, it shattered one of the trap's most essential elements. Now the manipulators are dealing with an outcome they never prepared for. Not only did their trap fail to catch you, but it also revealed who they really are to a wider audience. Your real friends now see the manipulators clearly. They've watched the tactics, noticed the contradictions, recognized the coordination. What was meant to isolate you actually isolated them instead. The community they thought they could turn against you is now questioning their credibility. The whisper campaigns backfired. The attempts to smear your reputation only highlighted their desperation. And your continued peace, your continued growth, your continued forward movement despite their schemes, it all became undeniable proof that their version of events was fiction. So now they're not just angry that the trap failed, they're furious that it exposed them. They're dealing with the social consequences of being caught in a lie. And meanwhile, chosen one, you're standing stronger, more connected, more validated than ever, because the people who matter never left your side. Number 5. You didn't need their validation, so their bait was useless. The entire trap was built on an assumption that turned out to be completely wrong. They assumed you still needed their approval, their acceptance, their acknowledgement. They thought dangling the possibility of reconciliation, of being welcomed back into their circle, of finally being seen the way you deserved, would be enough to make you lower your guard. They crafted scenarios where they'd position themselves as the gatekeepers to something you supposedly wanted: belonging, recognition, a seat at their table. But here's what shattered their leverage. You'd already walked away from that table, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You'd already realized that their validation was never the prize, it was the distraction. And without that hunger for their approval, their bait just sat there, untouched, irrelevant, powerless. Think about how much of manipulation relies on exploiting someone's need for external validation. The manipulator positions themselves as the source of worth, the decider of value, the judge of whether you're enough. And as long as you're seeking their approval, they have control. But you broke that cycle. Maybe it was through painful realizations. Maybe it was through repeatedly being disappointed by their conditional acceptance. Maybe it was through discovering your worth independent of their opinion. However it happened, you reached a point where their validation became meaningless. You stopped performing for their approval. You stopped shrinking to fit their expectations. You stopped caring whether they acknowledged your growth, your truth, your journey. And that liberation, that internal shift from external validation to internal knowing, it made you untouchable. Their trap required you to care about their opinion, but you'd already graduated past that need. So the trap sat there, perfectly designed but completely ineffective, because the bait no longer had any appeal. Now they're wrestling with a reality that bruises their ego in ways they can't articulate. You don't need them. You're not waiting for their approval. You're not seeking their inclusion. You've built a life, a sense of self, a foundation of worth that exists completely independent of their acknowledgement. And that independence is threatening to them because it means they've lost their power over you. They can't dangle acceptance as a reward anymore. They can't withdraw approval as punishment. Their entire system of control has been rendered obsolete by your self-sufficiency. So the fury you're witnessing isn't just about the trap failing. It's about the realization that they no longer matter to you the way they once did. They're dealing with their own irrelevance. And for people who built their identity on being needed, being important, being the center of attention, your indifference is the ultimate defeat. You didn't defeat them through revenge. You defeated them by outgrowing the need for their validation. And chosen one, that's a victory they can never take away from you. Number 6. The trap exposed them more than it ever could have hurt you. Here's the cosmic irony they're choking on right now. The trap they built with such precision, such careful planning, such invested energy, it didn't damage you at all, but it absolutely destroyed their credibility. Every move they made to try to catch you ended up revealing exactly who they are. The people they recruited to participate in the scheme are now questioning their judgment for getting involved. The lies they spread are unraveling under the weight of timeline inconsistencies. The fake concern they performed is being recognized as manipulation. And the beautiful part, chosen one, you didn't have to expose them, they exposed themselves. Their trap was so elaborate, so over the top, so obviously coordinated, that it became transparent to anyone paying attention. What was meant to be your downfall became their reveal. This is what happens when people operate from deception for so long that they forget how obvious their tactics are to someone watching from outside their delusion. They thought they were being subtle. They thought their coordination was seamless. They thought their performance was believable. But manipulation always leaves fingerprints. The timing is too convenient. The stories are too rehearsed. The energy is too calculated. And people who've developed discernment can spot these markers from a distance. So while they were busy congratulating themselves on their strategic brilliance, observers were taking notes on their character. People were recognizing patterns of behavior that raised red flags. Witnesses were connecting dots that painted a picture very different from the one the manipulators were trying to present. And now, as the dust settles and the trap lies broken on the ground, what remains isn't questions about you, it's questions about them. The fury they're experiencing stems from watching their reputation crumble in real time. They can't control the narrative anymore because the facts are speaking louder than their fiction. They can't gaslight their way out of this because too many people saw what actually happened. They can't play victim because their aggression was too documented. Every attempt to save face just digs them deeper into the hole they created. And meanwhile, You're over here living your life, building your future, focused on your purpose, completely unbothered by their chaos. That contrast is damning. It's proof. It shows who's operating in truth and who's drowning in lies. So let them be furious, chosen one. Let them rage against the reality that their perfect trap became the perfect mirror, reflecting their darkness back at them while you continue to walk in light. Their exposure was never your responsibility to orchestrate. The universe handled that on its own. Chosen one. As we close this message, understand something crucial. Their fury isn't about you anymore. It's about them facing the consequences of underestimating someone who sees clearly. You didn't just dodge their trap, you transcended it. And that transcendence is proof that no scheme designed against you can prosper when you're walking in awareness and truth. Hit that like button, subscribe to stay connected to this frequency, and drop 777 inches the comments if you felt every word of this in your spirit. You're not alone in seeing what others miss. You're part of a community that operates on a different level, and their failed traps are just confirmation that you're exactly where you're meant to be. Stay sharp, stay free, stay powerful,